Inside the Queenstown Prison Fire, a documentary investigation. 21 men lost their lives inside a prison just weeks before South Africa's first democratic election. But the fire is only part of the story. What happened inside Queenstown Prison has remained the subject of investigation, debate, and unanswered questions for decades. Stay with us as we reopen the evidence, examine the historical record, and separate confirmed fact from uncertainty. And if you value carefully researched African history and evidence-based documentaries, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps keep these important stories alive. Queenstown Prison Fire, Eastern Cape, South Africa. March 1994. By early 1994, South Africa was changing at a pace few had experienced before. Years of negotiation had led to the country's first non-racial democratic election, scheduled for April. Across towns and cities, people discussed the future with equal measures of hope and uncertainty. Political organizations prepared for campaigns. Communities debated what democracy might bring. Government departments faced enormous administrative change. Every institution, from local councils to national departments, was adjusting to a new political reality. Correctional facilities were no exception. Although prisons existed apart from ordinary public life, they were never isolated from the surrounding society. News traveled. Visitors arrived. Officials spoke. Radio broadcasts filtered through. Conversations carried fragments of information from outside the prison walls. Those fragments mattered. For many inmates, discussions surrounding voting rights and political participation raised difficult questions about inclusion, citizenship, and the future. Not every question had an immediate answer, and uncertainty often creates its own kind of tension. Queenstown Prison had been designed for control. Routine governed almost every aspect of daily life. Cells opened and closed according to schedule. Movement followed procedure. Names were recorded. Numbers were counted. Predictability formed part of the institution's purpose. Yet routines rely upon cooperation. When confidence in those routines begins to weaken, the structure itself comes under pressure. Prisons concentrate more than people. They concentrate emotion, frustration, expectation, fear, hope. Each feeling occupies the same confined space. During periods of wider national uncertainty, those pressures can become increasingly difficult to manage. Historical reports indicate that dissatisfaction among some prisoners had been growing during this period. Accounts differ regarding the precise causes. Some sources raise concerns about political developments and voting eligibility. Others refer to broader frustrations relating to prison conditions and administration. The historical record does not present one uncontested explanation. What remains consistent across multiple accounts is that tensions within the prison had increased before the incident. Pressure rarely announces itself. It accumulates. One conversation becomes several. A complaint becomes shared frustration. Rumors circulate without anyone knowing precisely where they began. Within correctional facilities, opportunities to release that pressure are limited. The institution is designed to contain, not necessarily to absorb. Officials responsible for maintaining order faced an increasingly delicate situation. Maintaining security requires more than locked doors. It depends upon communication, trust, procedure. When any one of those begins to weaken, small disruptions may carry larger consequences. Historical accounts suggest that, during the days leading up to the fire, the atmosphere inside sections of the prison had become noticeably more unsettled. Exactly how individual events developed remains disputed. Different witnesses later described different sequences. Investigative reports attempted to reconstruct the timeline from available evidence. As with many incidents occurring inside enclosed institutions, complete agreement proved difficult to achieve. On March 21, 1994, that underlying tension no longer remained beneath the surface. Reports describe unrest developing inside parts of the prison. Voices replaced routine. Movement replaced stillness. Officials attempted to respond within an environment that was becoming increasingly unpredictable. At this stage of the historical record, descriptions begin to diverge. Some accounts describe coordinated action by groups of prisoners. Others describe rapidly developing disturbances that spread through different areas. What investigators consistently recorded, however, was that the situation moved beyond ordinary prison management. Control had begun to slip. And once that happened, events started moving faster than anyone inside the building expected. Prisons are built to separate, to control movement, to create barriers. But barriers cannot contain uncertainty forever. As unrest continued, the conditions inside parts of Queenstown Prison changed rapidly. Routine disappeared. Commands became harder to enforce. Communication became increasingly difficult. Historical reports describe a situation that evolved over minutes rather than hours. Exactly what happened first remains a matter of differing testimony. Investigators later examined witness statements, official reports, and available records to establish a reliable sequence. Those sources do not agree on every detail. What they do agree upon is that the situation had become unstable. Inside a correctional facility, instability changes the meaning of time. Decisions that normally allow for discussion become immediate. Options narrow. Small delays begin to matter. During the unrest, a fire broke out within the prison. Multiple historical sources agree that flames entered areas where prisoners were being held. How the fire started has been described differently across various accounts and investigations. Some reports attributed the fire to actions taken during the disturbance. Other discussions focused on the conditions that allowed the situation to escalate. Those differences remain part of the historical record. The outcome, however, is not disputed. Once flames entered a confined environment, the danger increased quickly. Fire behaves differently inside enclosed buildings. Heat accumulates. Smoke spreads through available spaces. Visibility decreases. Breathing becomes difficult. Rooms designed to contain people can also limit opportunities for rapid evacuation. These are characteristics of confined space fires generally, not circumstances unique to this incident. Within Queenstown Prison, those characteristics now became part of an unfolding emergency. Correctional officials were suddenly faced with two responsibilities that could compete with one another: restoring order, protecting life. Those responsibilities are rarely simple during an emergency, especially when visibility is limited. Smoke reduces more than sight. It interrupts communication. It obscures movement. It complicates judgment. Historical records indicate that emergency responses were initiated as conditions deteriorated. Prison officials attempted to manage the disturbance while responding to the growing danger created by the fire. Exactly how individual decisions were made during those moments has remained the subject of later examination. Investigators attempted to reconstruct those decisions after the event. Like many emergencies, the evidence reflected the difficulty of understanding events that unfolded under extreme pressure. For those trapped within affected sections of the prison, conditions changed with alarming speed. Heat increased. Air became more difficult to breathe. Smoke reduced visibility. Movement became increasingly restricted. The architecture of correctional facilities is designed primarily for security. During emergencies, those same security measures can become significant operational challenges. Locked doors require controlled access. Controlled access requires communication. Communication requires clarity. When several of those systems come under pressure at the same time, every second becomes increasingly important. Investigative reports later examined whether structural limitations, operational decisions, or the broader circumstances contributed to the loss of life. Different conclusions have been offered over the years. The questions themselves became part of the history of the incident. Outside the prison, information emerged slowly. Initial reports were incomplete. As often happens during major incidents, early accounts differed from one another. Families searched for reliable information. Officials worked to establish confirmed facts. Journalists attempted to verify rapidly changing reports. In the absence of complete information, speculation traveled faster than certainty. That pattern is not unusual. Major emergencies frequently produce confusion before clarity. For investigators, separating fact from assumption would become one of the most demanding parts of the inquiry. When the fire had finally been brought under control, the scale of the tragedy became clear. 21 prisoners had died. Many others had been affected by the events of that day. The prison itself remained standing. Its walls were largely unchanged. Its purpose remained the same. But the history attached to those walls had changed permanently. Administrative routines gave way to investigations. Registers became records of loss. Incident reports replaced ordinary prison documentation. The focus shifted from maintaining order to understanding what had happened, and whether it could have been prevented. That question would continue long after the smoke had cleared. The emergency had ended. The questions had not. Once the immediate response was complete, attention shifted from rescue to reconstruction. Not reconstruction of the building, reconstruction of the timeline. Investigators gathered statements from correctional officials. Witness accounts were recorded. Administrative reports were compiled. Physical evidence was examined where possible. Each source offered part of the picture. None offered all of it. As with many incidents that unfold rapidly within secure institutions, the historical record reflects both agreement and uncertainty. Some facts were established quickly. Others have remained matters of interpretation. What is consistently reflected in official reporting is that 21 prisoners died during the fire that followed the unrest inside Queenstown Prison on March 21, 1994. Beyond that, investigators examined difficult questions. How did the disturbance develop? How did the fire spread? What opportunities existed to prevent the loss of life? Could different decisions have changed the outcome? Those questions became part of the public record. Not all received universally accepted answers. Historical events are not always remembered through a single narrative. Queenstown is one example. Some accounts have focused primarily on the actions that occurred during the unrest itself. Others have examined the broader environment in which those events unfolded. Researchers have also considered the operational realities of correctional facilities during a period of profound national transition. Those perspectives are not necessarily contradictory. They examine different parts of the same event. For historians, that distinction matters. A documentary is not expected to eliminate disagreement. Its responsibility is to distinguish between verified fact, reported evidence, and continuing uncertainty. In cases like this, certainty has limits. Recognizing those limits is part of understanding the history honestly. Only weeks later, South Africans voted in the country's first democratic election. The nation entered a new constitutional era. Many institutions began changing alongside it. The correctional system also evolved. Over time, questions surrounding prison management, emergency procedures, accountability, and detainee welfare became part of broader national discussions. The Queenstown fire was not the only event to influence those conversations. But it became one of the incidents remembered when South Africans reflected on the challenges facing institutions during a period of historic transition. History is often told through elections, through speeches, through legislation, less often through places that rarely appear in public memory. A prison cell, a register, an incident report. Yet those places also belong to the historical record. The significance of Queenstown does not rest only in the number of lives lost. It also reminds us that institutions are tested most severely when routine gives way to uncertainty. Buildings can be designed for order. Procedures can be written with precision. But emergencies rarely follow procedure. The value of studying incidents like this is not found in assigning simple answers decades later. It lies in understanding how systems respond under pressure. Where communication succeeds, where it fails, where preparation proves sufficient, and where it does not. Those lessons remain relevant far beyond one prison. They apply wherever responsibility, authority, and human lives intersect. Some historical events are remembered because every question was answered. Others endure because important questions remain. Queenstown belongs to the latter. The official record documents the loss. The investigations document the search for explanation. The passage of time has not removed every uncertainty, nor should uncertainty invite speculation presented as fact. Good history asks difficult questions. It also recognizes the difference between evidence and assumption. That distinction protects both truth and memory. For the families of those who died, for the officials who responded, and for future generations seeking to understand South Africa's journey through one of the most significant periods in its history. Because preserving history is not only about recording what happened. It is about recognizing what can still be learned and accepting that some case files remain open. This documentary is based on publicly available historical records, media reporting, official investigations, and other credible documentary sources available at the time of production. Where historical accounts differ, those differences have been identified as disputed or as matters of interpretation rather than presented as fact. This documentary is produced for educational, historical, and documentary purposes. Respect is extended to all victims, their families, correctional staff, and everyone affected by the events discussed. No private information has been intentionally disclosed. If you value carefully researched African history and documentary storytelling grounded in evidence rather than sensationalism, consider subscribing to Silent Docket Africa, because every silence leaves evidence. If you liked this story, kindly share, give your thoughts in the comments, like, and save.